take the roll.
Councilmember Thorson?
Here.
Councilmember Peterson? Here. Councilmember Wong?
Here.
Councilmember Cole?
Here.
Mayor Furlong?
Here, quorum is present. Motion to adopt the agenda. Moved by Councilmember Thorson,
Second.
second by Councilmember Cole. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And we have one topic. We'll start where we finished off last night. I'll turn it over to City Manager Frandl, and then you can turn it over to him.
Thank you, Mayor. We'll pick up where we left off yesterday. We got down to the PD and some of the asks that they have for their budget, and I will turn that over to Dan Winnick to discuss, please.
Want to start all over? No, I'm just kidding.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. Kind of take off from where we were at last night, kind of a quick overview that we've come in the budget from 9.9% increase to a 6.2%, and currently we're at a 4.7% levy increase over the 2021. Preliminary tax levies within Ramsey County is averaging about 5.87% to 6.44%, so we're within, we're actually underneath that average right now. And then we had come down to some additional items for discussion that are not currently within the budget. The first item, I'll kind of go through this because this will probably get a little bit of, hopefully some discussion and feedback from the city council on these items. I categorize them as direct levy impact and indirect levy impact, and what I mean by that is direct levy impact means that it's something that's going to be occurring over and over again. Indirect levy impact is more of a one-time cost item. One of the items, the first on the list, is COLA. In discussions and surveying with the cities within Ramsey County, what we have in the budget for our COLA for 2022 is 0.5% lower than what everybody else is budgeting. And just doing a little research and seeing what a number of the unions in other jurisdictions have been coming in at, I think very strongly that we should probably increase our COLA an additional 0.5%. What that would be, it would be a $24,000 impact to the budget, increasing our levy from the 4.7 to 5.1. I've also got another additional COLA. I think just the one additional 0.5 would be justified at this point in time. We have not begun union negotiations. Contracts will expire at the end of this year. And then as we were going through budget discussions with department heads, we did make some reductions. One of them was a reduction in the fire and code enforcement budget. We made two reductions. One was overtime, a reduction of $10,000. We're not requesting that to be added back, but we are putting out here to reinstate the part-time wages that we had reduced $18,000. Again, that would have approximate 0.3% change to the levy. So currently, what the fire and code enforcement is doing is they call it initial duty on weekends. There are 3 staff members that are there for 12 hours on both Saturday and Sunday. This $18,000 reduction would be to reduce that from 12 hours to 8 hours. If you add this back, it brings it back from the 8 back to the original 12 that was in the original budget. And then I was asked to look at the possibilities of where the mayor and the city council members' pay was. So Jenny was kind enough to reach out to some of the cities that are close to the same population as the city of North St. Paul. And what we found out that Mounds View, Arden Hills, and Vadnais Heights all had the mayor's pay at $7,500 and the council members at $6,750. Little Canada was a little lower at the mayor at $6,700 and the council at $5,850. Currently, the city of North St. Paul, the mayor is at 6,400 and the council members are at 5,200. If it was the desire to do that increase from a budgetary standpoint, it would be about an $8,000 increase. Obviously, there would still need to be council action to approve that in a resolution, but from a budgetary standpoint, that's the impact that that would have. And then we also had a request, as we met with the department heads, from the new police chief, and he expressed the desire to add a police sergeant, so they would have supervision 24/7. Currently, there's 3 sergeants, and there are 4 evenings that there is no supervision and coverage. And so he had recommended that there be a 4th police sergeant. That would be a cost impact on the general fund of approximately $138,000, which would increase the levy 2.5%. We've kind of had a little bit of a discussion with him, and kind of the suggestion is the timing may not be perfectly right at this time, especially with the city looking and out for advertisement for a city manager. It may be better to have that discussion with the city council, maybe in the form of a workshop, to get kind of his ideas and his thoughts, and something that may be pursued in 2023. The police sergeants are predominantly out on the streets. He just sees that there's a lack of having that supervision on a 24/7 basis. But I think that, unfortunately, he couldn't be here tonight to speak to that. But I think a workshop would be prudent to have with the police chief in the future to get some of his ideas and thoughts that he's seeing as he's stepped into his role.
That'd be a good idea to
Yeah.
have them at workshop for
Yeah.
police department.
He also had some more immediate needs. One is being, again, I look as more of the indirect, the one-time costs, is the police record management system. It's come to our attention when we met with the department heads that their current record management system is going to become obsolete by the end of this year. And he's got an estimated cost of range of $150,000 to $200,000. There's still a lot of work to be developed to get, quotes and follow the purchasing policy and so forth. But we wanted to bring that to your attention. That may be something that may be funded through the leftover of the CARE funding. At the end of the workshop yesterday, I kind of gave a handout. It was brought up in the prior workshop, wanted to know what we had spent the CARE funding for, so I kind of put that together in kind of categories. There's approximately $162,000 that's available. This may be a very good place to utilize those funds on the record management system. There's also police squad computers. He's got the range of about $50,000 to $60,000. He's looking into the use of the forfeiture fund. There's a forfeiture fund that has a balance of approximately $110,000. He's looking and working with the city attorney to see if that is an eligible expense to use out of those forfeiture funds. And then he's also got the request for handheld radios in the CIP that we will go over a little bit later. There is $75,000 for the police in the 2022. That could be moved up. So that's, at least partial funding for that request. Again, his estimate's $110,000. Hopefully that will come down some as he gets some quotes and bids on that work. And then there was kind of a late, I didn't have, it came up after this meeting, and it's just for discussion, that there is a newly created Arts and Culture Commission, and the thought was maybe we want to put something in maybe the recreation budget for any incidental expenses that may be related to the Arts and Culture Commission. And, you know, maybe just a $3,000 for whether it's attending different conferences or, you know, learning or registrations for different information, just as a placeholder to put into the budget. But those items are really up for discussion, and so kind of turn the floor over to the city council and kind of seek some direction.
You're saying like seed money for the arts,
Absolutely.
just to have something in there to start with.
Yep, just to have something to start with, yep.
And that can be transferred from the Park and Rec,
Yes,
potential.
potential, yes.
Good.
So is there any discussion on any of these items? Any thoughts?
All of them.
All of the above.
I'll open up to the council.
Sure, I'll start. And I had an opportunity to email Dan earlier about just my initial thoughts. But to go over, I mean, the police department, I mean, I think it's just a little premature to start jumping in and start creating new positions that have that kind of impact on the budget, especially when we're still technically short-staffed. I mean, we already approved hiring the 2 other officers and the 2 CSOs. I understand the argument about the supervisory position, because we've you know, that's been brought up in the past when we had the captain's position created, and then at one point there was a proposal to create a lieutenant's position on top of that. So it would be, the proposal was to have a police chief, a lieutenant, the captain, and then 3 sergeants. And the recommendation was for that chain of command and to make sure that there's adequate supervision during, you know, these random hours. But I wasn't sure, you know, we had a public safety study that was conducted back in 2018, I think it was completed. I think that was their recommendation, that we be at 4 sergeants to satisfy that need. But I just think with the new police chief coming on, we're still short officers, the new city manager to be onboarded in December. That's probably just a better decision to put off for a year, because it'd be nice to see, to me, if we had a full budgeted staff of police officers, if that can't be, maybe it's just like a scheduling thing or something that can't be resolved. But I just don't feel comfortable moving ahead with something like that right now. The CARES Act money, you know, I think, you know, that's something that, you know, it's one-time money and it was issued to us to be used. I don't think we should continue to carry that forward year over year. If there's stuff that we should be spending that money on, we should spend that. Especially, I think, if there's some requirements from, I know we met that initial requirement because we allocated the difference to public safety, right? So we met the audit requirement, but yet we're budgeting on what we've spent it on. And I guess I had a question too about that and how the 2020 budget, we established a budget, and then obviously the pandemic hit, and we had this influx of cash. We had a balance technically. I'm assuming that this is at the end of 2020, or is this just year to date? That's what happens to be the balance, and that could be a combination of expenses from 2020 and 2021 year to date. Okay. So in theory, this number could have been higher at the end of fiscal year 2020. And I'm assuming then that we would have finished the year with a surplus. And I haven't seen anything that's indicated what that number is, and we don't really get into a habit of reviewing previous year's budgets because we're dealing with the future year. But our policy is if we end the year with a surplus, that surplus money gets allocated to particular funds like street maintenance and whatever, and that helps build up our fund balance. So I'm just kind of curious if we had a carryover surplus and our fund balances are kind of healthy. I know at least our general fund, we've had set a goal to be at 35%, and we're at that. So how much excess are we over that? And then, does it make sense to continue to build those up, or can we dip into that to help fund some of these one-time things and help keep the levy down? And I know that's, probably not a question you can answer off the top of your head here. But I just think that we should really consider utilizing that excess funds due to this coronavirus, and then this coronavirus stuff, the balance to these one-time expenses like what the police department's proposing. I mean, that's something we're gonna have to do, and that's a pretty significant one-time cost. As far as the radio equipment and stuff, that'd be great if it turns out we can use that forfeiture fund to help supplement that, but I think that would fall under this category as well, as an eligible expense to be used for this stuff, because there is a qualifications or a list of things that you can and can't use this funds for. As far as the increases in council pay, I mean, I know it's not a lot, but just on the face of it, it seems like it's kind of tone deaf, like not the right time to do that coming out of pandemic. There's a lot of people still unemployed, and just kind of seems like not a prudent thing to do, so I wouldn't support that, but it doesn't matter because I'm forgoing my pay anyway. So that's up to the council. And I'm assuming that we would have to amend or have a vote on my waiving of the pay like we did last year, at the beginning of this year, and then a modification to the existing ordinance that states what our current pay is. Okay. And then, I guess this is something that, we've discussed in the past a little bit, and this is more of a policy, higher level issue too. But I wanted to discuss, because we're talking about this weekend shift now that the fire department is doing, and that was news to me when I found out about it. I don't know if we ever had discussion about
Say
that.
that again.
They're doing this weekend shift. That's what's that third item there?
Yep.
So they started having 3 firefighters at the station basically all weekend to cover medical response calls. And before that, they had like a duty crew or a first responder program, they call it, where you would just sign up, and they wanted to have people on coverage from basically Monday through Friday and the off hours of the full-time hours. And this is a supplement to Lakeview Ambulance's response to medical calls. And it just seems like this was something new that wasn't discussed, and it obviously increased their budget. So I'm wondering if it, I think it makes sense to have a workshop with the fire department as well, and to discuss this and how this is impacting the budget. And if this, what spawned this change? I mean, are we not having response to medical calls? I obviously was involved in this program when it started, and still speak to people that are involved with it today, and it just seems like there's some conflicting reasoning behind why we're doing it and what's the actual public benefit that they're receiving from it. And again, the public safety study that was conducted back in 2018, they weren't asked to review the program itself and whether or not it was justifiable. They were just asked to review the staffing model, and they made some recommendations based off of that. But the statistics that they shared were that 8% of the medical calls were critical in nature. And that was kind of the whole nexus behind needing to do this supplemental response along with Lakeview, is that, we don't know when calls are gonna be critical or not, and what resources they'll need. But it just seems like that's something that I think we need to have a further discussion on, because it just seems like that could potentially be a larger expense in that personnel. It's the part-time wages budget. And I talked to the finance director previously, and we kind of looked at, was it from 2017 to the proposed 2021, the increases in there, and it's pretty significant. So I think that was kind of it that I had marked down.
Councilmember Peterson?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was the one that brought up the council, looking at that. I appreciate your comments too, and that you don't take a salary. I think to retain good people, I think you have to pay them. We're not looking at 2 meetings a month anymore. We are spread thin. I mean, I go to a lot of stuff on my own time, volunteer-wise. I don't work full-time. I don't need this for, income for me. But you guys, you work out of the house, and you have commissions, and then we signed up for all this stuff. I get it. But it's being increased. And I just think, time is valuable. It's been a while. I can't remember when they changed it. It was prior, well, it must have been in Mike Keene's.
It was 91, I think.
Was it 91? Okay. We used to get a premium for mileage, so they just decided to lump some of the salary, which works, because otherwise it's more paperwork. But I just think to get quality folks to run, not that you're going to make a lot of money, but I think your time is valuable, and I think you should be paid for that compensation. That's just my feeling.
I think a lot of people don't even know that they get paid when they run. I know when I signed up, I didn't know I got paid.
No, I know that, Terry.
No, I'm just being.
No, I know. Well, it's like you get your stipend and whatever, but then you look at the month, and I mean, you're busy. And then you do more, as a mayor, you do more, and it's not ribbon cutting, it's not the fun things. I mean, that's the fun things. But we do a lot, a budget time is, it's a heavier load, and it's once a year, but I don't know, I just threw that out. So if there's no appetite for it, fine, I just wanted to bring it up. Thank you.
Councilmember Wong?
Looking at personnel, I would appreciate a workshop with, heads, just to have a little bit more of a justification, understanding, a little bit of data behind it as well. That would be helpful to make that decision. And in terms of the radios, I believe the fire department is also looking at a purchase within the next year or two. Is there an opportunity to bundle that, or to get a reduced price? Just kind of consolidating that purchase as a potential option to save money.
You're saying the fire department is looking?
I believe it said 2023 they were looking at needing radios as well.
Councilmember Wong, that is correct. Yes, they do have a request, and it's in the CIP in the 2023.
2023.
So potentially if there's an opportunity for that to save some money. In terms of the council pay, I don't really have at this point an opinion on that just yet. So I think that's all for now.
Arts and Culture Commission too, that was brought up too.
Yeah, we had a discussion about, kind of onboarding some of the commissioners, and, we went over, okay, well, the open meeting laws, okay, there's we could hire Soren for a pretty penny, or we can look at the League of Minnesota Cities to provide, their 60-minute module for $15, but we realize, do we have a budget for, for the Arts and Culture Commission? So I think some seed money to help structure and just get started would be helpful for the count, for them.
Councilmember Cole.
I'll just start at the top of my list. Fill me in a little bit on the recommendation for a COLA increase of 0.5%, and how that differs from when we've got union negotiations coming up the end of this year, first part of next year. Does one offset the other? Is one gonna make up for the other? Yeah, just help me, this is my first rodeo, so help me see some steps out.
Sure, Councilmember Cole, actually, we should probably have already started union negotiations because they'll expire at the end of the year. What this is from a budgetary standpoint. Currently, and if you want me to tell the percentage that I have in there or not, I kind of a little bit reluctant just in case somebody from negotiations. But when in communications with the other cities within Ramsey County, we'd asked the question where everybody else was at, what kind of percent increase that they had in their budgets. And we are 0.5% below what everybody else is. And I think I had mentioned yesterday, there's articles out there with some of the inflation that Social Security is looking at, a 6% potential increase for cost of living. I looked at some other unions in their contracts. I saw a lot of them that are in the range of anywhere between 3 to 4%, and having 3-year contracts that are, in between 10 to 12% increases on the 3-year basis. We're below that with what's in our budget right now. With the unknown of what the union negotiations will turn out, I just think that it's safer to be in line with at least what the other cities around our locale are at. And so that 0.5% would get us to where they are at. And I think that to me is highly recommended to be included into our 2022 budget.
Just going down my list, reference council and mayor pay. I agree with Councilmember Wong. I guess I don't have an opinion at this time. I just put back of the envelope math. If we're at 64 and 52, and it looks like the majority of communities around us are at 75, and I wrote down 67. 6,750. We're roughly about 25 to 30% below. There's gonna come a time for a catch up. Don't know when that might be. I didn't take this responsibility to pay. I guess I really don't have a horse in the race on this one, but I guess I was surprised at the gap. I agree with Councilmember Wong. I would love both police and fire to come in and just kind of bring me up to speed a little bit. I guess I had a bit of a sticker shock when I heard the cost replacement of some things. I know they're real. I guess it just I wasn't ready for those kind of dollar amounts for radios. I mean, I know they're not what you buy at Target, Walmart, or if Radio Shack's still around, but
Are they around? I don't know if they
I
are.
don't know either. I guess what's the age of them? What's the life expectancy? What kind of shape are they currently in? Can we limp another year or two to Councilmember Wong's point? Is there strength in negotiation if we're going to buy more type of thing? So those are just some kind of my open questions. Not discounting the ask, but just more curious about that. Park and Rec seed money for the Arts Commission. You got to start with something. So I'm certainly not opposed to that. And if it's just transferring some money from a county to a started, that's, it's, I think money well spent. I did have in my notes here, and it may have been in the packet, I didn't catch it. The EDA had asked for a staff head count, to help with, some of the things and to lessen the load. And actually, they wanted a dedicated staff person. I don't know if the city's ever had a dedicated EDA. I looked at the historians in the room.
We did.
To help out with that. My question is, do we need additional staff, period? Is that something we should be taking a look at? Is the workload amongst everyone at the level that we could use it on the guy? So I didn't see that in the proposal. Could very well could have been there, but I didn't see it. Did I miss anything? I think that was it for my notes.
And I would concur on the fire and the police. I think we need to have a meeting with the fire chief and the police chief and get our understanding in regards to, what their needs are. In the past, we always had, department heads come in and make a little spiel in regards to their needs for the year. And I think that helps us, the council, understand their needs. Because I'm not a fireman, I'm not a policeman, I don't run their departments, and, we just need to understand.
Would you like to schedule that independent of each other, or can we do that at one time? How would you like that?
Well, they can be the same day, but they got to be independent.
Well, certainly, yeah. Okay.
Whether or not it's, timing-wise, I think we're getting towards the end. So, maybe having them together, but, separate presentations would be good. And then the replacing of the record management, I agree, let's possibly use some of our care funding for that. I think that's a good expense for that. Same with the squad computers, if we're able to use that, and if we're able to, replace those radios, again, let's find out from department heads if the fire department can actually piggyback onto the police, and, it's also a possible CARES funding. Could that possibly be a CARES funding? The equipment?
Mayor, yes, it could be. So the CARE funds, in I think Councilmember Thorson said it very well, we've already met all of the requirements for the $900,000 grant that we got. So the money can be used for anything at this point in time. It's just my recommendation that it's used for one-time things and not to buy down the
Sure.
levy. Yeah.
Okay. And then the arts and culture, yeah, I would agree. Let's get some seed money in there. I'd go with the recommendation of Councilmember Wong in regards to an amount within reason. That can be possible. But yeah, I think they need, some sort of seed money for that. And I think that's it. That kind of give you a perspective? Councilmember Thorson.
Quick follow-up, I think I can give a little bit of context to these radios. I believe it was back in 2008, everyone had to switch over to what's called 800 megahertz. And there are the radios you see people walking around with, they're like $3,000 or $4,000 a piece. And I believe that same timing was the Republican National Convention that was at St. Paul. They were kind of outfitted here, and they retrofitted, or they bought some TV monitors, and I think we got some grant funding. Maybe it was just a coincidence, but the fire department ended up getting like 70 radios, I think, and it was enough to outfit every vehicle, and then every current member had their own pack set radio to take home. And that was a question I had, and, you know, at the lifespan of these radios, I think it's kind of a racket, but it's tied to the manufacturers, and they stopped doing software updates. My radio that I had, you know, we were instructed to take it home and carry it with you at all times, but it's just kind of a big bulky thing, and we're responding from our home to the station and getting in a truck. The trucks all had radios. It sat and collected dust. I mean, I think I used it a handful of times when I actually signed up for the first responder program, just because it was there, but there were other radios available. And so that was my question I had at the time, just as a concerned taxpayer, is, well, gee, in 10 or 15 years, we need to replace these. Are we gonna buy 70 more when we don't need them? In my opinion, but I think that would be, you know, what is the total count? If we have excess radios, I mean, obviously you want a budget to have extra in case some go down, but I think, in my opinion, and being on the department for 10 and a half years, we had more than we needed. And to replace every single one now just because we have them, I think it's important to understand that we got the amount we have now because of a grant application, and I believe the police were involved in some of that as well. But I just hate to see us replacing 70 radios or whatever the number is. It's probably a little less than that, just because we have them, you know.
Well, hopefully they'll be able to tell us if, you know, if there's a grant and they bought everything that they could at that time, you know, within that time from when we're on to now, hopefully they'll be able to tell us, you know, that they do have access and they don't need as many. Again, you know, without being on, you know, you were part of it, but, you know, what is the update now? How many are they using? I think they should be able to tell us that, I would assume. Going back to the pay, I would say, if you don't mind, I didn't bring that up, but I understand Councilmember Peterson's, you know, reason for raising, and I also understand, you know, we're way below, you know, what did you say, 25%?
25 to,
You know, even if we were,
25 to 30%.
even if we were just to raise it, you know, 10%, you know, let's start raising a little bit year by year, just to kind of be in that ballpark. So I'd be okay with, you know, a little raise, you know, maybe not so much the full amount at this time, but, you know, raise it a little bit. So that's where I am with that.
Mr. Mayor and Council,
No, I'm
a couple other things I'd like for you, sorry, sorry,
just, city manager.
excuse me, were you, go ahead. Oh, I just wanted to throw a few things out there for you guys to keep in mind as you move forward as well. So you guys have brought up before about with the new city manager position and the potential of doing a assistant city manager. He's either assistant to or assistant city manager. I wasn't clear on how you wanted to do that. Either way, that is another salary that needs to be thrown in this mix somewhere. Being that I spend a lot of time over in community services at this point, in my opinion, I think we have one clerical staff over there that is part-time. I think they should be moved to full-time. That is just my opinion. And not that you need to move on it right now. I think a new city manager that comes in is going to have his own vision for how things are going to be run and if they have an assistant and how they work that. But there are a lot of job duties that were spread out over the individuals that are there now, and there used to be at least 2 more employees in that department. So I can tell you right now their workload is heavy. So I just wanted to throw that out there to you guys to think about as we move forward with the budgeting process.
And again, I think that's, you know, good to hear, you know, that potentially we might need that position as a full-time. But I also, you know, understand too, we got to get a city manager in here who's going to be able to analyze, you know, what the situation is. But, you know, Brian, or city manager, I respect your kind of oversee, because you've been here many years and understand the organization, where someone coming in may not understand the organization, you know, right away. And you recognize that gap right now that needs to be filled. So, you know, it's reality. You know, if we put it in now or have to put it in next year, you know, when the new city manager comes in.
Yeah, and with that, I mean, a shout out to Carrie, who's does such a spectacular job and goes above and beyond what she needs to. She picks up some of those extra duties, whether or not it was picking up phones or picking up slack where she can, and she just does a great job with that as well, so.
So do we add that part-time, full-time, and just see what it looks like?
Mayor, we certainly can. Yep, I can run out the numbers for that. You do have some options, and we'll take a look a little bit later, both in the HRA and the EDA. Obviously, we levy, in past practice has been levying to the maximum per the state statute, which does give us some room within there to charge back some staff time if they're directly related to both the HRA and EDA. So I think that there's some room there not to just burden the general fund itself.
And I think we've done that in the past. We've used part of the HRA, EDA for personnel.
Yes, that is correct. Actually, the city manager has percentage of time coming out of those also, yeah.
Just a quick comment about the council pay. You know, I understand it's kind of a touchy subject too for elected officials, maybe not so much for some. I know Ramsey County, they gave themselves quite a significant increase a couple years ago. And, you know, what you have to base it off of is naturally, well, what are other cities paying? And you kind of try to compare to like cities, you know. I don't know if you can compare Matamidi with North St. Paul in a sense that maybe it's a little more affluent community. They got wealthier individuals that live on the lake and things like that. But, you know, I just did a quick search here. The average median household income for North St. Paul, and this was 2019 data. I'm sure once the census data is out, I couldn't find it on there, but according to this, just a Google search, is $64,722. So if you do, you know, just quick rough math, right now, council pays at $5,200, that's roughly 8% of the median. Now, that number changes and fluctuates, but it seems like that would be more of a thing to look at as far as, well, what are you in line with paying yourself, and what's your, you know, you have to have some basis to draw on, and the median household income seems like it would be a good indicator because it's a reflection of the economy and in your community. So maybe that might be something to look at, considering as for a policy on how to adopt council pay is, you know, on a some sort of regular basis. You look at an adjustment. Now that may be up or down, but it's based off of some number like that. It doesn't have to be that exact number, but then at least there's some sense behind it rather than just, you know, waiting for an election or whatever it is, comparing yourself to the highest paid community in the county or whatever. Just something that has more of a basis of logical sense than just kind of waiting. I think it was 91, I want to say, is the last time it was done. So it was a long time ago, but I don't know, just throwing that out there as an idea rather than just looking at what like Maplewood's doing, you know.
It was based on like cities, size of the city,
Correct, yes.
population-wise.
Yes, yeah, the actual cities that responded, if you give me 1 second, were Mounds View, that has a population of approximately 13,000, Arden Hills, that has a population about 10,000, Vadnais Heights, again, in that 13,000 range, we're at 12 in Little Canada. So it was trying to get the comparability of population. But Councilmember Thorson, I mean, I think you throwed out a very interesting, you know, way of looking at it, which, you know, could be developed into kind of a policy that's reviewed every 2 to 3 years based upon that median household income, and it's either increased or decreased. That's a.
And then just to be clear too, and the reason I know all this is because when I first proposed to not get paid and was told, well, you can't, and looked into it, and turns out, you know, it takes council action based off our ordinance, and we didn't technically have one. But if we were to do this, it doesn't take effect until the next election cycle. And yes, we're budgeting for it, but you can't vote to give yourself a raise and then it takes place retroactive. So it would be the next election cycle, not, pertaining to your particular cycle of, I'm in the middle of a 4-year term or whatever. It's just the next election, which would be the midterm elections coming up. That's when it would take place. So in theory, if you vote to give yourself a raise and you don't win, you're not going to see that. Not that that's the reason why we're doing it, but just in the context of discussions of how are we justifying it, that might make some sense and kind of avoid disagreements and stuff in the future about what's appropriate level of pay. But I mean, that's just always something that can get changed too by policy, so.
Anything else? Anything else that we need to?
Well, we have plenty to continue to go over. Those are kind of the discussion items, and I thank you very much, Council, for direction on that, and so gather some data and information. I kind of want to share, which I'm very excited about, the 2022 debt plan. Up on top here is what the debt issuance and what our debt service is right now for the city of North St. Paul. You can see we've kind of established a plan where the GO building refunding 2012A in the amount of $433,000. That is actually for the construction of this building. It was actually originally bonded in 2002, refunded in 2012. We actually have enough money after the collection of property taxes in December to actually pay that a year early. It's the final payment is actually due in 2023. What this does is this opens up an opportunity for us, not increasing our levy, to actually go out and bond in 2022 versus we were looking at 2023 when the sunset. In addition to that, by shifting it from a market value-based levy to a net tax capacity levy, which has an impact on fiscal disparities, if everything else holds true, it would actually generate additional revenue of approximately $110,000 for the city in 2023. So then, right now our levy, for a levy of 1% increase in the levy approximates about $55,000. So right now we're already setting ourselves up for the 2023 to be able to increase 2% and have no levy increase for the taxpayers. Part of that is that because the shifting from market value to net tax capacity is increasing our local tax rate, which goes into the calculation for the fiscal disparities. That estimate was done upon this 4.7% levy increase in addition. So very excited about that. It's a great opportunity for the city to go out and do some projects, and we'll talk about those in a little while. You can see the remaining. We're also looking at coming up and refunding the 2014A bonds, just because of interest rates being so low at this point in time. That is something that will be coming to the City Council to approve. The issuance of those on September 21st is our timeline right now. That would save us over approximately $139,000. We're actually looking at trying to make that even an increase savings onto that, which then would actually lower our overall debt, which then could help lower the tax levy. Part of that would be we have some equipment certificates that have 2 years left. Initial look at the funds that have accumulated in that debt service fund for that bond issuance. It appears that we would be able to pay for that equipment certificate instead of including it in the refunding of the bond, and then thus lowering our debt levy a little bit. But I don't have the solid numbers on that yet to propose what we could do with a reduction into that. Last year, there was a TIF that was created, and there was a 2020A bond issuance. That's the first time that we're going to be paying for that debt of $92,000. When I prepared this, I was looking at it that we would utilize, there's still some funds that are available from that TIF bond. We haven't gotten the green light that the project and all costs are totally complete and done. I know that the mayor has also expressed that there were some additional work that wanted to be done with that TIF as far as some site improvements, as far as plantings, irrigation system, on the 7th Street. We'll check with Baker Tilly to see if those will be eligible expenses to be able to be paid from these bonds. So my initial thought was to utilize some of those. It is eligible to be able to utilize those excess funds that's in that fund. There's approximately $190,000 that's available there right now to use to buy down the debt. However, because of how we're switching this bonding, I think I'm going to have enough capacity in there to not have to utilize that TIF because I can leverage when we buy out the refunding bond of 2012, I can leverage $5 million in general fund with the interest rates that are out there. If we issue early part of next year, we'll probably have a debt payment somewhere in the range of about $320,000. We should levy about 1.5% of that amount. With the 92, we'll probably be back about that $433,000. So we don't have an increase in our debt levy. To me, I'm excited about this. I think that we've got some great opportunity. What this could do for us, we worked with the interim city manager, Brian, and Morgan, our city's engineer, and we came up with kind of what our plan would be to utilize for the 2022 street and utility reconstruction project costs. We came up with the total project cost, and I'll show that in a little while, of $9.2 million. If we were to utilize the ARPA funds of 1.3, street maintenance of $500,000, there would be utility bonds of 2.4 and general fund bonds of approximately $5 million to be able to fund that. That is all included in our CIP plan. That we can go through. I can at least give a high level and look for you to look at that later on. That's something that I'm very excited about because my understanding is this is the first time that the city's really had a more comprehensive look at the CIP. And again, it's the beginning. There's adjustments that need to be made to it. But this was created prior to me being here. And we've had the department heads relook at it again just recently to update if there's any cost changes, useful life changes, whatever they were seeing on their horizon. So I think it's a pretty good document to begin future planning, which I am excited about. The rest of this document here kind of really goes into more or less many of the documents that were provided in our last workshop, just showing where the general fund is at, where the revenues are coming in, where the expenditures are. Right now, the revenues and expenditures balance at about 7.7. It's increasing the levy, 4.6%. You can go in here and you can look at the general fund. You can see that property taxes are, approximately 4.2 million of the 7.7. You can see where intergovernmental revenue comes from. LGA is the biggest contributor to that, and you can see the different expenditures. The biggest drivers to our general fund are personnel costs. Our personnel costs. With the addition of a couple of positions that have already been discussed and included in the budget, are really around 6% of an increase. It's by making some reductions that we've already made that we've gotten down to that 4.7% levy increase, which I think is a very positive piece. A reminder that in 2 weeks, we will be certifying our maximum levy. Doesn't mean that the levy can't come down after that. especially the timing of what some of these workshops would be. The one I see that has a potential of maybe more reduction would be with the fire department workshop, to get an understanding if there's any changes that could be made with that part-time component to it. The police workshop would just generate an increase if we were to do, staff changes. Again, I keep hearing the dialogue around the city manager position, and waiting for that city manager to come in, and I actually believe that that's probably the best strategy at this point in time. What this budget does is that because of that fiscal disparities component to it, is it's setting us up for the 2023 where we can have, in essence, a little bit higher general fund increase, but not increasing the levy as much, because of that fiscal disparities and shifting some of the bonded debt. In addition, we can get a lot of work done that I've heard repeatedly at the council meetings in my time here that are really needed. The plan has, and I think I'll pull it up, the plan has a couple of parking lots, one primarily that we had discussed yesterday. It's got a number of street projects that are included, and if I can try to get the packet up here. It's is to, pardon?
Click into the meeting here, because then you can pull it up in your tabs easier than downloading the whole thing.
Okay.
So yes, you're looking for yesterday's meeting.
Well, no, I'm actually looking, well, it's either today or yesterday's.
So if you click here,
Oh, gotcha.
that's where, it'll be easier than downloading the whole
Okay.
packet.
And can I get to the other attachment that was? No?
Click here on agenda files, that would be any of the attachments that were in the packet. So these are the links
Oh,
to the attachments.
perfect. Thank you, Carrie. I know
It doesn't change.
it hasn't changed. So I'm gonna stop sharing and see if I can. There we go. So of that $9.2 million of project costs, you can see that there's a number of items that are on the 7th Avenue project. Morgan put together the spreadsheet which kind of identifies the street component, the street maintenance items are all here. Sanitary, water, and storm sewer cost breakdown. So you can see in the 7th Avenue project, it includes 7th Avenue East concrete pavement, Helen Street concrete pavement, 4th Avenue, an alley of 4th Avenue to 5th Avenue. There's parking lot reconstruction project. There's 2 of them that are included into this plan. There is reclamation projects with Maplewood that we had talked about earlier at a previous city council meeting. Allows us to partner with another governmental entity, kind of saving costs both for us and for them. There's a Mcknight water main project, again, that was discussed in a previous council meeting that's working with Ramsey County. So we can get some water main work done, and then they'll pay over that after we're complete with our part of the water main replacement. 10th Avenue utility improvements projects, there's sanitary sewer lining projects, and the maintenance overlay projects that are all part of this plan. So I think it's a fantastic plan if we really want to get out and try to take advantage of the low bonding interest rates. I will be asking at the next city council meeting on September 21st for the, adopting of this plan and to asking our, get the correct verbiage for it. For our city engineer to start to do a feasibility study on these projects so they can start to develop a little bit more of the plans and to kind of firm up cost estimates that we would need to go out for bonding in early part of 2022. The next part that if this all works, that I'd kind of like to show is kind of just a brief, and I'm not going to go through everything, kind of the CIP plan that we have put together at this point. This is the overall capital improvement projects plan that has been developed. It has items in there for vehicle and equipment, building and facility improvements, capital technology, pavement preservation, ponds, natural resources, environment, parks, playgrounds, paths, open space, streets and utility reconstruction, utility infrastructure, preservations. There's backup detail on each one of these categories by department, and it'll show a quick description of the item, its useful life, when it was acquired, when it needs to be replaced, and an estimated dollar cost for that. What the summary does is kind of show you it's a 10-year look of what the costs are per year. And then I have recommendations on how we kind of do a level funding moving into the future. Part of my recommendation is overall my philosophy is a little bit different. What I would like to see as we move forth is that the general fund be able to be established and stand on its own without a lot of transfer ins and transfer outs and dependencies on the utilities. Where I would like to see the potential for dependency, if needed, it is from the enterprise funds is really for the infrastructural needs of the city itself. The day-to-day operation really should be able to sustain itself. It should be based upon the property taxes. And the enterprise fund should, if there's assistance that's needed, it would really go towards more of the capital improvement project needs. The city does have a lot of infrastructural needs. It's an aging system. We need to keep up onto that, and that's really the development of this first 10-year look. It's something that needs to be continuously looked at and revised by staff to make sure that we're doing good. The good part to it is, as you can see, and I'll just take a quick look at this vehicle and equipment. Right now, there's $3.3 million that's is the cash balance. So we're actually sitting pretty good when we look at the vehicle and equipment replacement, street maintenance. We're sitting very, very good. And to kind of comment back onto a point that Councilmember Thorson had brought up about the year end and the fund balance policy. Even though I wasn't here, my understanding is, and I've got it pretty confirmed, I don't have the numbers that were there, but yes, there were transfers that were done at the end of the year because there was surplus in the general fund. So it was moved to like street maintenance fund and vehicle and equipment. And that's kind of where a lot of those funds have accumulated over time. So we're sitting good in some of the funds. Some of them we're gonna need some help, on the technology, and when we look at the parks component to it, we're gonna need some assistance as time moves on. Everything that's coming out of the general fund to support this capital improvement project is already incorporated into the budget. So when you see the the annual funding, like on the vehicle and equipment of a $507,000, that is in the general fund budget. That's at that 4.7 level right now. But if there's any questions with this, I know there's a lot of information to kind of digest. I'm excited because this is really starting to get that visionary plan of where the city needs to be moving into the future. I'm really excited about the opportunity to get $9.2 million worth of work done at this time, which I believe, you know, and you're seeing at the federal level, this is an opportunity because of the low interest rates. This is an opportunity to create jobs. This is an opportunity to, you know, help beautify this wonderful city, which just attracts people moving into the future. So I'm excited about the budget. I'm excited about where we're at with the 4.7. I do have to remind that on the 21st, we will have to certify our maximum levies for the general. We will have to certify for HRA, and we'll have to certify for the Economic Development Authority. In addition, we'll be bringing forth a request for approval of issuing refunding bonds, and then also for the authority to develop with our engineer to develop work plans for the projects that are part of that $9.2 million. And we also have to set the TNT date.
Is it the what?
Truth and taxation.
Do we have a date for that?
I think we were looking at, Jenny, in the calendar, you know, there's a time frame. It can't be before November 25th by statute, and it can't be after December something. I think to hit the city council meetings, I think it would be, was it December 3rd? Or 7th? 7th? December 7th would be our truth and taxation. And then
December 7th.
Yeah, December 7th.
Yep.
And then just needed to get confirmation that there would still be a council meeting on the 21st, because then that would be the meeting in which we would finalize and approve all the budgets.
Everybody okay with December 7th and December 21st?
Yeah, I think traditionally, we've had that truth and taxation meeting the night we approve the final budget. I've taken issue with that because it's kind of bad spirit that you have your official public hearing about the levy that you're about to approve, and that there's kind of little expectation that anything major will change from any feedback we get. But it is kind of a formality, and we're not required to do it, but I think it's good that we do it, and I think doing it the meeting before we adopt it at least gives some time if someone brings something up that we all have overlooked. Would make sense, so I'm fine with that.
So December 7th and 21st.
Correct.
Yep, got it.
Yeah, quick question here for the, looking at the building and facility improvements. It's on kind of the bottom of page 1 there. We've got highlighted, you know, there's roughly $650,000 for the community center, and I'm sure a lot of that is tied to the roof improvements and other various kind of deferred maintenance items. And it looks like there's also a solid waste fund transfer too for that $650,000. Can we discuss what the plan for that is and why we're doing that?
The simple answer to, Councilmember Thorson, the simple answer to why we're doing that is because there hasn't been an appropriate capital improvement plan in the past. And so there hasn't been enough funds that have accumulated for building and facility improvements. You know, this facility's approaching 20 years old, and there's no funds that have been adopted and built up. Same thing with the community center. So because of the immediate need that has presented itself at the community center. The way to be able to do that is to be able to transfer from the solid waste fund for that $650,000. And yes, it does include the roof component to it.
And I'm assuming that fund was identified because there's always been an excess amount of funds in that fund, and I'm assuming that based off of previous documents we've looked at, that fund continues to sustain itself. I believe it actually has grown. And to me, that's an indicator that we're still overcharging our trash and recycling rates. I think that's something we should look at. I know that we're going to start seeing a 3% increase now moving forward at the end of this year from our hauler, but I think now starting at the beginning of 2022, we're going to be in year 3 of a 5-year contract. So then I would assume next year we're going to probably want to put out another request for proposal or start negotiating with them again. And I was going to ask about that too. I mean, what's kind of, in your opinion, a good practice to do requests for proposals on services? I mean, we subcontract quite a few services. We get WSB with our engineering, Campbell Knutson with our attorneys. When is the last time and again, not that I'm not happy with these people. I mean, they've done great work, but, I don't know, to my knowledge, the last time we've ever looked at just put an RFP out there and seeing where we're at. I mean, they do good work, but I don't know, I can't compare them to anything else because to my knowledge, we haven't looked at that in a while. Is that something that we should be doing on some sort of regular basis? Is it appropriate to look into that now, or maybe that's something to look at for the next year?
Councilmember Thorson, in being in Ramsey County prior to this, we normally would never look at anything beyond a 5-year contract or engagement, and so every 5 years you would normally go out for an RFP for services unless it was technology related, and you can kind of understand the reason for that just because of the time it takes to migrate from one software system to another and so forth, and the investment that goes into it. Those would be looked at a minimum of 10 years. But I definitely agree. I mean, it doesn't hurt to run an RFP from time to time for your professional services. One of the trade-offs to that, there's nothing statutorily that's going to require you to do that on a periodic basis, but in practice, it's good theory. However, there's something that you need to be aware of is that when you move from one vendor to another vendor, that there's a learning curve that takes time for them to establish. And so that learning curve is costs.
It's been a tough 2 years.
Yeah.
Just keep it going.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I can respect that, but at the same time, we're hiring an attorney and we're relying on their professional opinions in the law. I mean, I don't really know that they have to be completely entrenched in North St. Paul to do their job. Just likewise with engineering, it's not like, what's the difference between a company like SEH, who contracts with many cities in Ramsey County, versus WSB? I mean, it's not like we're asking someone to come in here and start over on a century's worth of knowledge and research in town. We're hiring you to do, a survey on the street. I mean, that's not necessarily something where you have to have a lot of institutional knowledge. It's just we're hiring you to do your job. But, if it's not appropriate to do this cycle, so be it. But so to go back to this solid waste fund, I didn't see a current fund balance in that fund. I'm assuming that transferring this 650 out of that is, we're still, I guess that's what I've asked before, is it kind of like, what are all of our fund balances and why do we have the amount of money in them? And, kind of similar to the general fund, we've set that benchmark and it's a recommendation based off of, bond rating companies that you should be at around 35%, and we're at that. So some of these other funds, like the solid waste fund, I think it's around 800,000, maybe it's close to 900 now. Looks like we're scheduling a transfer 650,000 out. That's a pretty significant amount of money. I would assume it's because that fund has been evaluated and the need to have that amount of money there just doesn't exist. So do we kind of have that knowledge of all these other funds, and are there other funds that maybe have excess amounts that we should be looking at utilizing for some of these projects that we're talking about?
Councilmember Thorson, that's another part of my excitement that I kind of shared last night, and that is that the city actually owns a tool. It's an Excel spreadsheet. It's actually quite elaborate. That was developed by Baker Tilly. I've reached out to them and waiting on a proposal for them to update it, and then it was something that we can maintain afterwards. It literally does a roadmap for you on every single one of your funds. It does a so every one of the utilities, every one of the departments. You can play what ifs with it. So the intent is to start to input all of this capital improvement program information into it, update it with all of our budgetary information, history, kind of trends, looking at customers from the electric, water, so forth, all the way through. Before we spend, so I'm rough order of magnitude, I'm anticipating that that's going to be somewhere just underneath $10,000 for them to update this, and then after that, we can take it over ourselves. Before we go into a full-blown utility rate study, this tool will tell us and give us an indication whether we really need to do a utility rate study. So in kind of the easiest way of kind of looking at it is that after we input all of our information, if our revenues, if we're still getting net incomes in our utilities, high net incomes that are in there, then then we need to look at the potential of a rate decrease. If it's the opposite way, then we need to potentially look at a rate increase. We'll take guidelines that fund balances really should have a certain amount of percentage. We need to have that operating. Normally, you look at something anywhere between a 4 to 6 month of your annual operating costs to be in that fund balance for an internal service fund. We will look at all of that and give us a good indication. I'm excited because it's really going to start to help us plan and do a much better job. And it'll assist me in doing a better job in keeping the city council aware of where your fund balances are, what we can afford and what we can't afford as we're moving forth into the future.
Sure. Because that's my concern, is that, if we make a decision like this to make a significant transfer out of like the solid waste fund, and then next year we start having discussion about rates or negotiating with a new contract, that's used as a justification for higher rates, that now, well, our fund isn't sufficient. I don't want that to become a reason for, increasing rates or whatever, especially if we've got sufficient funds in it as is. But that's good to hear that we're moving towards that and can answer, at least eliminate an unknown. So I think that's been at least a frustration for me and my time on the council. It just seems like every year there seems to be difficulties in having consistency, and it's for various reasons. But it'd be nice to just be on a steady path where we're looking at a apples to apples comparison, and we're not making major changes like we have in the past in allocating things like insurance. That's clearly a general fund expense out of the enterprise funds. I mean, that was one of the reasons why we saw those big swings. And if you look further back in budgets back into 2012, 13, or even before that. So I'm glad to hear that we're moving towards that direction and being more consistent.
I think as a council as a whole, we've always felt that way. We just never had the tools. It seems like, we need to forecast out, if it's 2 years or 5 years or whatever it is. I mean, we need to understand, I understand Councilmember Thorson's, but, in the past, we just haven't had those tools to, we were told we were going to get those tools, but we never really had them. But it'd be nice to be in that path that you're talking about, and if it's we would want the levy to be going like this all the time. If we're missing money in different pools we need to raise. So having that tool, I think, would be very important to have.
One other quick question. So you talked about earlier how we're gonna pay, or we can potentially pay off that gold bond early. And I could have swore I've asked this question in the past about paying off debts early. Now, maybe this is because, and goes back to the trash conversation, there's an amount that was pledged when we did the bonding to come from these revenue or these enterprise funds to help pay for, I believe it was the community center. And so there was an amount pledged out of the solid waste fund to pay a portion of that debt. And, you know, there was initial discussion that maybe doing some consolidation, you know, having all these funds, we don't necessarily need to have them all. Maybe eliminating this solid waste fund would be something to help simplify things. But that's what prevented that from happening, is because there was money that was pledged to be paid out of the solid waste fund, so it still needed to physically exist. And then I asked the question, well, what if how much debt do we have left? Can we just pay it off? And I was told, well, no, we can't do that. But it must have been, we can't pay off the debt that's associated with the trash fund because it still exists. That must have been the explanation versus just, no, we can't pay these debts off early?
Not all bonds can be paid off early.
Okay.
Many of them have callable periods, so after a certain duration, then you can actually pay them off early. Usually traditionally it's like 2 to 3 years at the time that they're going to expire.
Okay.
So we just passed it on this bond. That's why I think it was just the beginning, or towards the early part of this year, that gives us the opportunity to actually pay this one off early without any penalties or anything onto it. So,
And that the Public Works building isn't that far along yet. That must be where we're at with that, on why we can't pay that one down or off.
correct. Yeah, we looked at everything of all of our bond issuances that we have right now to what could be paid off now, and then we had Baker Tilly do a quick look at what was eligible for refunding. And we came up with the one bond that was eligible for refunding, and then Kyle Staska and myself looked into this other one and realized have accumulated, a large part of it has to do that you have to levy 1.5% more than you actually need to take into consideration any delinquent, property taxes and that sort. But it ends up accumulating over, 18 years into the fund. And so we had enough to be able to pay that off. And so then we looked at the actual bond issuance and found that it was past its date that we could call it. And then, of course, then we just did a double check with Baker Tilly to make sure that we weren't missing anything. And so we're going to take that advantage of it.
So the solid waste fund needs to exist at least till we reach that same period with the Public Works building.
And I need to look into that and get a little bit more familiar. I can't answer that affirmatively at this point in time, so I need to look at that.
Because if we've got excess funds in that fund, maybe that's a good candidate to help with this seed money for the Arts Commission.
From the solid waste? What'd you say? Solid waste?
I mean, if there's just all this excess money, that would seem like a transfer out of there. If we're looking for a place to transfer money out of.
Right. Right now, my recommendation is that, I'm comfortable with what we've presented for the 2022 budget and where the fundings and the transfers are going to happen. I really would like to get this tool up and running, and we can have it up and running before the end of this year. But I would like to take a look at everything to find out, and then have a workshop where I can inform the city council where we're at, and then those decisions can be made. I just personally don't feel comfortable until I've looked at everything and made sure that we're making a good recommendation to the city council.
I appreciate that. Okay. Onward?
Onward, I want to thank Mayor and the City Council for your feedback. We've got some work to do here to look at some numbers and come back in. Our just kind of an overall, on the 21st, we'll be bringing a lot of resolutions to do the maximum levy. How do we want to how do we want to look at some of these suggested changes and the potential impact that it'll have on the levy to be at least vetted before we get into the 21st, so we have to actually certify that maximum levy. There was a couple of items that potentially could change things if we were to look at additional staff for the EDA. Is primarily the other ones, the numbers appear to be that we already have on the discussion list.
I think maybe have another budget meeting outside of the council. Have it as quick as possible if we could.
Okay.
Next week, would that be work for everybody, or? Monday night? Monday night?
Tuesday,
What's that?
Monday or Tuesday.
Tuesday would work for me.
Tuesday would work. Tuesday?
And would you like PD and fire present?
What is it?
PD and fire, would like them present for that discussion at that
If you
time?
want to schedule it as soon as possible, that would work.
Okay, I'll check with them.
It'd be nice to also hear from the Public Works at some time, not necessarily, right away, but I think just to hear from them. It was always nice to hear from the department heads in regards to budget.
It is.
Tuesday night at 5.
Okay.
That gives you enough time, Dan, to,
Yes, I won't be updating everything that we've had in the past. We'll be kind of taking us from this 4.7 and then have kind of like that discussion item sheet that shows the item, the cost, and the potential impact of where we would be for the budget. Yeah,
Okay.
I can turn that around to get it out because it'll end up having to be published by the end of the week, yeah.
okay.
Because if, my understanding, what you're asking us is, what do you want that max levy dollar amount to be for the meeting, our next council meeting, correct?
For the 21st, yes.
Good job, Dan. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the discussion dialogue this evening. Helps give a lot of direction and gives me a good sense of maybe some suggestions that we can do a little bit differently for next year's budget.
Good.
Thank you.
Just want to apologize last night at the council. That note that I read to the chief from the resident, he could be a potential candidate for the city manager position, and I did not know that at that time. So I was not endorsing him last night by reading that. Just want to make that clear. Yeah, but I just wanted to make clear that I was not endorsing him for that position. So with that.
You didn't say his name, so, or your
I
name?
think I did.
Did you? Oh,
I think I did,
I didn't hear it,
yeah.
so I want to ask.
And everything that was going on, I just read it and. Holy water. This is the holy water. That was it. All right, any other comments or anything? If not, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Thorson, second by Councilmember Wong. Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, everybody.
No, that's Monday.
It's the